Hello and welcome to the Photography Pod, a photography podcast for working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. This is series 2 of the Photography Pod, and we're back after the summer break. My name is Steve Vaughan, but I have a new co-host, and his name is Nick Church. Nick, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, great to be here. Really excited about this current season of the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to do it. So we should just explain, first of all, why you're doing the pod and where Martin has gone. So for people who've been listening to the pod up till now, I was doing it originally with a guy called Martin Chung. Martin's still around, of course, but Martin has his own very, very successful podcast called Wedding Photography Unveiled, and with shooting about a zillion weddings that he shoots as well, he just felt it was a little bit much to take on at this particular moment in time. So we wish Martin all the best, and I'm sure he'll come back at some stage as a guest on the show, but I'm delighted to have Nick here with me. And Nick, you did come on the podcast a few shows ago, really, but I think it would be good just to recap for the listener, a bit about yourself, what it is you do, what you shoot, and then I'll do the same for myself as well. So over to you.
Yeah, sure. When was it, about 2 or 3 months ago?
It was while I was in the States, so it's going to be March time, something like that, yeah.
So I was on your podcast, and I was on Martin's wedding one as well. So,
of course you were, yeah.
Which gives a bit of a point towards me being a wedding photographer.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into too much detail because otherwise people that will have heard when I was on the podcast before will be so bored they'll just drive off the road for listening to the car.
No, don't do that, please.
So I had like almost every other photographer had a background in IT. Right. And moved from the boardroom just in 2018 or so. My photography passion was starting to grow and just went full time into wedding photography. And I've since weddings is still the main bulk of my work, I'm guessing, but I think probably it's about sort of 60-40 now with commercial work as well. Okay. So interiors and things like that. And I do coaching as well. So that's the three things: the weddings, the commercial, and the coaching side. I really love that balance. It's like I just love variety. I've realized in my ancient age that just doing one thing, it just drives me a bit mad. So having the variety and doing stuff like this is just really exciting. So I do love that.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I'm a Sony shooter. So I've got a couple of A7 IV bodies, which I use daily, although one is starting to need a bit of TLC, so I need to get that service. But exclusively Sony with GM lenses, and that's my setup. I do a bit of film, although the films that I do is typically, if it's commercial film, then I do it myself. If it's wedding films, it's typically as an add-on to photography. So I'm normally kind of employing filmmakers to do that side of it.
Sure.
As well.
And of course, your business is nickchurchphotography.co.uk from memory, yeah.
That's right, yeah. So if people want to have a nose around at portfolio and a bit more about me, then nickchurchphotography.co.uk and Nick Church Photography on all the socials as well.
Brilliant. So a bit about myself, for those of you that don't know me. So if you're ancient, I'm positively prehistoric because I'm much older than you. But I'm like you, I get bored very quickly doing the same thing. So I got bored of being in the corporate life. So my background, I'm not IT, I'm a scientist by background. And I spent 25 years selling scientific instruments until it made me, bored, but also ill. I was running a big business for General Electric, in fact, 10 years ago, almost to the day. And my wife Sam and I started a wedding photography business. We'd already had it, we'd done a number of weddings before then. So for 10 years, we've photographed weddings under the brand of Sam and Steve Photography. We're a bit different to yourself in that we're coming to the end of our photography journey. So we've already decided that May 2026 will be the end of our wedding photography business. I'll still be an enthusiast photographer, I'm sure, after that. But most of my working life now is spent in the world of sales training and sales coaching. So if people find me on LinkedIn, that's all I talk about. I don't do anything on photography at all. But photography will always be my passion and my love, even if I'm not doing it professionally at some stage in the near future. And like you, we're Sony shooters. We've got a bag full of Sony gear as well. A7 IV, A9, A7R4. You've got an A7C2 as well, which is what I'm talking to you on right now. In fact, and a whole mix of GM lenses as well. But I'm sure we'll have a lot of time to talk about gear over the next few months. And I should say this isn't a Sony podcast, by the way. The fact that we shoot Sony isn't, it's a coincidence rather than the sort of main theme of the show.
When you in 2026, when you hang up the old cameras in terms of business, you're going to presumably be shooting loads more sort of passion projects and street photography and all kinds of things that you probably don't get time to do now.
That's the plan, really. I mean, we'll still probably do a few weddings, perhaps as sole traders, and I'd like to do some second shooting, actually, which I've never really done. But obviously, as we're getting a bit older, we're grandparents now. We have a grandson living not far from you, actually, in Bristol. So, we want some weekends to see him. But yeah, I think the thought is that, we can do things that we enjoy doing. I don't know when was the last time I took any pictures for fun. Actually, I do. We went to Lisbon a few weeks ago. But, when you do this for a job, you stop doing it for fun, don't you, really?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, I suppose, if you're a woodworker, you don't take a lathe home and do some woodwork, do you, really?
Why builders' houses are normally the most tatty, because it's just they can't bring themselves to do anything.
You've seen my neighbour. So how's your summer been anyway? Have you been busy?
Yeah, really busy, actually. It's the plan was with the commercial stuff that would fill, the more wintry kind of months.
Okay.
And try and flatten that kind of hump that we all get as wedding photographers, or you and I certainly. But actually what's happened is that it all happens at the same time. So I've just made a really busy few months. But yeah, it's good. I think we get better as we get more experienced and older. You get better at pushing back on things you think, well, that's going to take a huge amount of my time.
Yeah.
Is it going to benefit me? Do I need that? And it means you can sort of spread your time a bit more sensibly with sort of work-life balance and that kind of thing. So I'm certainly trying to do that a bit better this year.
And that's an important phrase. I think work-life balance is probably why we all started doing this as a job, really, because we got sick of the corporate life and not having a work-life balance. And that's super important. Work made me mentally ill sort of 10 years ago. I'm not embarrassed to say that. So, I'm always very conscious of the importance of work-life balance and keeping that sort of balance in kilter if we can at all.
Well, I think it's the control of your time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I don't think many of us do. We don't do fewer hours. Any professional photographer is, the professional photographer listening is going to think, well, I'm working bloody long hours. However, you've got the ability to say, I'm not going to be working on that afternoon, and there's no politics involved. It's just a much more healthy environment when you're in control of it.
Completely. Let's talk a bit about what we want to do with this podcast. So, we've introduced ourselves again and, our background, but let's talk a little bit about what we want to do with this podcast. So I put a call out in the Facebook group we have for the podcast saying, did anybody want to co-host? And a number of people put their hand up, but you were very, very, very keen. So why did you want to do it? What made you fancy coming on and doing a podcast with me?
It's just, I think it's, I think for an introvert, as I'm fairly introverted normally,
okay, I've
got a strange kind of mix of I really quite like to do things like this. And maybe it's because, I don't know, it's not a social environment in the same way. I don't know. Yeah. But I just really, really find it a positive thing for me personally, for my health and everything else. I just feel like I'm contributing to the industry, which I'm really passionate about. I really, I love the photography industry. I think it's a really healthy, collaborative group of people.
Absolutely.
Anything like this, I know you're going to go on to, we could say about the guests we've got coming in. And I'm sure that's going to kind of be mirrored with when we talk to all of those people, all of the interactions that they have with their peers. And it's just a really great environment to be part of. And, I'm a tech guy. I love setting up lighting. I love setting up things. And it's a good opportunity to do that with an actual goal in mind, which is to actually present something and to have some content coming out there.
Yeah, brilliant. Totally agree. I'm not an introvert, as you probably gather, but I'm the opposite. But no, it's fun. As you say, putting something back, really. Photography's given us both a career for a number of years, but putting something back in is a great message. So let's talk a little bit about what we want to do over the course of the podcast. So we're aiming to do one every couple of weeks. And every other week, on average, not necessarily every other week, but nearly every other week, we plan to have a guest. And we've already got a number of guests lined up. And we'll say a little bit at the end about who's going to be our first guest before we leave. But there's a number of parts to the podcast that we want to have as recurring themes. So one of which is we're calling the 10-minute techie talk, for want of a better phrase. So, we're assuming that people listen to the podcast know a bit about photography. So we're not going to talk exposure triangle. We're not going to say this is aperture, this is shutter speed, this is ISO, and so on. But we are going to focus on something techie I think you've got some thoughts around that as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I think you touched on it there. I think who would be the sort of listener that's going to find value in this, and like you said, I think there are loads of beginner podcasts for beginners, and I think trying to recreate that doesn't make sense.
No.
And it's unlikely that by doing stuff that's aimed at beginners, those professionals and aspiring professionals and enthusiasts are probably not going to find something that's particularly valuable there. So we kind of do want to sort of skip past that beginner stage and really sort of be able to do a bit more of a deep dive on certain topics. The technicals, the whole kind of tech 10, I think there's so much technical stuff around and developments going on. I mean, we've just seen this week, and we'll come on to sort of news and things shortly, but there's so much going on, and I think it's great to sort of talk about that and think what the benefits might be. And with technical stuff, we're often a little bit cagey about changes to the technical landscape that we're working in, like AI. And I'm sure AI is a topic that is going to come up frequently, at least once every episode. And it's embracing those things, because once we sort of realize what the benefits are and what the pros and cons are and those sorts of things, then it's actually a really healthy thing to be looking at this technical environment. And if people like me, so if there's a listener that's a bit like me, I don't trawl. I'm aware of industry news and have got sort of relatively passionate views on all the technical developments that we're seeing happen at the moment. I'm not the sort of person that's scouring through camera magazines. I did when I started, but I don't seem to get time to do that nowadays. And so having a podcast, if there's somebody like me that is kind of curating all of the kind of streams of news, bits of kit, things that might be of interest, then that's a really great service, because it would save so much time from going through and just sort of digging around the web looking for new stuff. And
that's what we're going to try and do. We're, as you say, we're not. We haven't got the fingers on the pulse. We haven't got a direct line to any of the manufacturers or anything like that. We're not YouTubers with 1 million subscribers or whatever, but we are going to keep an eye on what's going on. And on that note, actually, I noticed there's a new Sony 85mm f1.4 being trailed, the GM2. Did you see that?
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have the original one?
I've got the original one, yeah. And I was interested to see that it's lighter. So the version 2 is going to be a fair chunk lighter. I'm guessing it's going to be quicker in terms of drive motors and things like that, because it's pretty sluggish, that 85. And in terms of minimum focus distance, I do use it at weddings, but only because it's 1.4, and it means I can just get rid of the 7200, actually get some natural light photos a little bit later. But it's not a great lens for me to use in the studio. Perfect, but you don't have to worry about that focusing speed and things like that. But
we don't have it, actually. I looked at it and thought, no, it's a bit of a dog, so we bought the Sigma, actually. We've got the Sigma 85-1.4, which is a nice lens, albeit a bit warmer, so the editing is slightly challenging by that. So
right.
So that, in terms of industry news, that's the first thing I saw. Obviously, there's been a lot of stuff happening on the Canon front. Now, neither of us shoot Canon, but there's been lots of news about the R3 that's come out recently, which I think is, a lot of people are saying it's like an R1 Mark II, really, very much aimed at the sports photography world. And controversially, there seems to be a lot of issues about Canon sensors and whether they're up to the mark anymore. So it's probably just lost half of our listeners by me just saying that, really. But
well, that's worth mentioning, isn't it? That any of these things that we're going to talk about is just our view, and what do we know? We're just in amongst it with just two people with opinions. It's not.
So I'm sure we'll come back to that as a theme. But so that's the kind of thing we're going to talk about, guys. We're going to just talk about things that we've heard in the news. Our opinions. Please don't go and make technical decisions or buying decisions based on what us say. What do we know? But hopefully we'll stimulate some conversation and some debate. And on that basis, we would love, listeners to get in contact, ask us some questions, bring up some points they'd like us to talk about, or even disagree with us. And we'll tell you a bit later on in the show how you can do that. So watch this space on that one.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think if people have got topics that would be, that they'd like to hear discussed, and you can guarantee there'll be tons of other people that would feel the same way. So that's always really good.
Absolutely. Other things we're going to have a regular book review. So books that we book/films or any kind of media. Yeah.
Although not music, I don't think.
We could do music.
I can't think of a photography angle. I mean, apart from music that has the word camera. Aztec camera. I mean, I don't see the value of it.
Books list, camera never lies. Let's not do music now. Books and movies. So things that we've seen or things that we've got would be fun, I think, really. So I'm sadly for my sins, I'm an Aston Villa supporter, and I follow an Aston Villa podcast. And there's a guy who's just publishing a book actually, who's followed the season last year and took photos from the terraces, not as photographing the action, but photographing what's going around him. And it sounds really good. So that might be a book that we'll look at. And again, that's probably alienated quite a few of our listeners already. I hope there's some left after that.
There's a guy, that I'm hoping to see if he'll come on to be interviewed on here, but a guy called Peter Dench, photographer and journalist, very well known, huge back catalogue of work and books and so on. And he captures those sorts of things that you've talked about, sort of like shots from the terraces or shots from the high street. It's just fascinating, his work. So I'd love to chat a bit more with him about that.
Yeah, and get his book as well. That sounds great, really. So
I think things with film, the reason I thought films is useful. I mean, there's obviously the films about photography, and so the last one I can think of was Civil War.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that
Alex Garland. So that's really interesting, sort of near future view of photojournalists and war. So it's a civil war in the US, and this team of photojournalists that are traveling around, and it makes total sense that every platoon or every group of personnel in the armed forces have these photojournalists that are coming around, which would make sense. And there's loads of freelance photographers going around, sort of capturing all of these amazing scenes. So that was really interesting. But I think the other angle with films is that, I don't know about you, Steve, but whenever I watch, one thing that photography has done for me is virtually ruined just watching a movie or any TV show, because you're looking at lighting and you're
completely.
And because I'm completely the opposite of being able to multitask, as soon as I'm looking at lighting, I've stopped listening about what's going on in the show, so I have to rewind. But I'm seeing loads of really interesting things around photography and lenses and things. So just recently we watched and I don't think it's particularly new. It's called The English with Emily Blunt. It's about sort of post-Civil War US,
Don't know that one.
And how the American Indian communities sort of were treated. It's absolutely fascinating. But the director has chosen, so it's a Hugo Blick. He was the director, and the director of photography, guy called I've got it written down here, Arnaud Valcolomer, uses very traditional lenses. They wanted to recreate that kind of Western look, so the old kind of cowboy sort of film look. And so they're using these lenses that are they're beautifully colored lenses. So they're really lovely colors, but they're really bad at focus breathing. So every time there's a focus rack pull, the breathing, so the field of view changes dramatically. It's really quite a woozy sort of disturbing feeling. I thought, wow, that is really interesting. I wonder how many bits of film like that, where the lens manufacturers are putting millions of pounds of development into stopping things like focus breathing, and then directors are actually making that choice to use that to recreate the whole thing. And the other thing I see that happening a lot is image grain or film noise and film grain being artificially injected into the films, to create this old-fashioned film stock, or to create like an edgy kind of Kodak-y kind of look or whatever film stock they're trying to recreate. So we've got all of this technology going on to minimize the amount of noise going on. And then right in the post-processing stage, just chucking in a load of artificial noise, which it does give it that raw kind of look. And it is great for certain films and Netflix shows and things like that.
So if you've got an example of a film like that, dear listener, we'd love to hear about it. It's a bit like modern musicians putting on record scratches and clicks and pops, isn't it, to make it sound like it was recorded on vinyl or played on vinyl, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so, exactly, yeah.
I think, on movies, before we move on, I think the movie I always springs to mind when we talk about cinematography, not that I know anything about cinematography particularly, but is Band of Brothers. Is it Band of Brothers? When they land on D-Day? The one with Tom Hanks is Band of Brothers, isn't it?
I think Band of Brothers is the series.
Oh, right. What's the one where they land on Saving Private Ryan? Of course it is. Yeah, sorry. Tom Hanks, anyway. So, and they're on the D-Day beach, and we've got a home cinema thing here in the living room, and I remember watching it, and the bullets are flying around everywhere, and it felt really, really live. My dad was actually at D-Day, and I read afterwards that they shot it at a really high frame rate, something like 100 frames a second, So to get that sort of almost staccato, hyper sensitive, hyper real, if you like, frame rate going on to make everything look really, really jarry. And now thinking about it, that makes a lot of sense, really, because that they're trying to recreate that sort of immediate impact, really.
And it does give you that feeling, doesn't it? It's, I don't know how that works in the psychology of our brains, how that a frame rate creates an immersive feeling, because you wouldn't have thought it would. You can see how focal length would.
Yeah,
but it definitely does, and you see it on action films as well. They'll stack up the frame rate and get sort of really jittery sort of movement, which is, apart from you see Netflix struggling to keep up with it because it goes really blocky when they do it. So but it just feels great, especially in a cinema.
Yeah, I suppose there's a difference between watching something made on a GoPro, which is 60 frames a second normally, isn't it? Or as opposed to on a mirrorless camera with an ND filter shot at 24 frames a second. Anyway, we're going wildly off topic here because video is not my comfort zone. Although, like you, we do a bit of video as well. So let's go back to the world of photography for a second then. So one of the things we used to do with Martin and I, because Martin has a reputation for being a bit of a gearhead, should I say, gearhead, and buying lots of gear. We used to do, what have you bought this month? So have you bought anything at all in terms of equipment, or bought anything new at all recently?
I bought a couple of guitars.
Does
that count? Does that count? No, I don't think I have. I've got these lights. Right. So these are Godox ML30 or ML60 eye lights. So these are probably the most recent thing that I got. And they're fantastic. They're mostly for video. But they are really great. So
have you got soft boxes and things on them, or are they just...
It's just a standard... Yeah, but they're small enough. I can't take it out and show you, but they're small enough that they fit into a Bowen's S bracket type thing. So you just put my standard softbox on it.
All right.
It works a treat. So that's the only thing. Like I said, I am going to be looking at probably if this A7 IV, which is giving me a few issues, it's the lens mount. It's a weird thing. If you move the lens, it suddenly loses connection. Oh, right. If that, hopefully that will limp on, but because next year I'll probably be looking at upgrading. So that's going to be like a deep dive into camera bodies, and I'm guessing it'll be a Sony choice because just can't justify the cost of switching everything else out.
No, what's the point? Yeah.
What about you? What's new for you?
Well, the only major thing we bought really, and I have a reputation for buying gear as well. If my wife's listening to this, she'll confirm that, as will my accountant. But the last thing that we bought that was very significant really was a Fujifilm camera. So people that know me from old in the photography world know that we used to shoot Fujifilm, and we still got a lot of friends in the Fujifilm world, even though we don't use them professionally. And about the X100 line of cameras, the small rangefinder style cameras, and because of TikTok, they became completely unobtainable. Somebody did a TikTok video about them, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to buy one.
That's because they look so great. They're physically beautiful things, aren't they?
Oh, they are. Yeah.
If you're sitting in a really nice cafe with your flat white and your leather statue and your MacBook, having that next to you, that's the most important thing.
If you can't afford a Leica, that's the next best thing, I guess, really. Yeah. So they brought out the 6, which is the latest version of it, earlier this year. And because it's the 90th anniversary of Fujifilm as a company, Fujifilm these days is a massive biopharma company and cosmetics company. Photography is a tiny part of their business now, but it's 90 years since the company started. So 1936 was the year the company started. They decided to make a limited edition 1936 worldwide of the X106. And in the UK, the marketing manager, who we know quite well, made, which I think was a good decision. Basically, you could put your name in a hat to get drawn out, not to win one, but to get the chance to buy one. And Samantha got a chance to buy one. So, and the list price normally is, I think, £1,600. The limited edition is £2,000.
Right.
And it's £2,000 we didn't need to spend because we didn't need another camera. But we thought, well, why not? And when we do finish shooting professionally, we want our own gear. So we bought one. It's a thing of beauty. It really is. We could have put it on eBay for $3,500 immediately.
Wow!
Because it's going to become even more valuable because it's only literally 1936 worldwide.
I suppose when you're looking at kit for your own purposes, then it is a different set of criteria, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And
battery life isn't quite so important, and things like that, and other things become more important. Like, what does it feel like? Do you love using it? Is it something that makes you want to go out and take photos?
And I think, a lot of people, the Fuji guys, talk about their cameras having soul and Sony's not having soul, which I think is a load of BS. But I know what they mean. The Sonys are computers. They just never do anything wrong. They just work and work and work, which is what you want when you're shooting professionally. But I don't think they're fun to use. And this camera is fun to use. And no doubt about it, really. Being old as I am, you've got a proper shutter speed dial and aperture ring and all that kind of stuff. And we took it to Lisbon for a long weekend, and it was just great to use. She loved using it, really. So that's the only major thing that we've bought. All the bits and pieces, always audio gear.
Are you shooting JPEG on that Fuji?
Both, really, because, the Fujis have the film simulations. So you can dial into the JPEG a film-like look. So it replicates the classic Fujifilm film stock or, they obviously don't say Kodak, but Kodak type images.
Okay. But you can do that in Light, so you can shoot RAW and then apply that later. Yeah,
it's not quite the same. Right. Again, there'll be people listening to this podcast who know far more about this than I, but the Lightroom versions aren't as good, I don't think. They're obviously not made by Fujifilm. One thing Fujifilm have as a film manufacturer is a lot of understanding of colour science, really. So thing of beauty. Took it to a wedding, actually, on Sunday, just for a bit of fun, because it was a marquee type wedding. Got a few comments. Always had a film camera. Is that an old camera? So no, that was the only major thing that we've bought. There's a few things I got my eye on. I probably won't go for the 85 because I quite like the Sigma. It's good enough really for me. So that's up till now. But you never know. Next time I'm on here, I might tell you I've just bought a new screen or a new monitor or something like that. Who knows? So,
well, as you know, the microphones is my microphones and guitars. That's that's where most of my money's going at the moment. So I'm sure now that I've got those things, I'll be looking back to the WEX and so on. Where'd you get your stuff from, Steve?
Varies, really. So, WEX and places. There is a camera shop here in Bicester. There's a proper camera shop still called ImageX. The guy who runs it is a great guy, Robert Peckham, his name is. And they don't really have an awful lot of gear, but they can get stuff. But what they are is great at, and I hope this doesn't sound patronising, but they're great at sort of little old ladies coming in and saying, I've got this picture on my phone, how can I get a print of it? They're fantastic at that.
I can remember there was a store in Bristol on the corner of Corn Street, which a really old, like very traditional camera store. If you look at old vintage photos of Bristol, it's a camera shop back then, So,
right.
But it was near where I worked when I had a proper job, and I had to go and buy a bag. And I went into this shop and I joined the queue. There's about sort of 4 people in the queue, and the guy serving was just taking his time. He was chatting to each person, just if they were buying a bag, he was asking them what they shop with and all those things.
Fantastic.
And then we get to the next one. I thought, what a great job. That'd be like, he's got no pressure. When it comes 5 o'clock, shop's closed, just does photography all day, just talking about it. And I thought, what a fantastic job. I don't think it's there anymore. Which
a shame too.
It is a shame, yeah.
And again, on that basis, I'm not ashamed to say that we bought a lot of our Sony stuff on grey imports. So we never did with Fujifilm because we knew the people that work for Fujifilm in the UK, and the price difference wasn't that great, really. But the difference between buying grey from somewhere like Panama's with the Sony gear in the UK, it's like 25%.
It's crazy. Yeah, I think before I was VAT registered, I definitely used to do the same. Once I got to pay, once I can claim the VAT back on UK stuff, it's still a bit cheaper, the grey market, but not to the point that it's a no-brainer to do it. You'd think, well, all right, I'm paying extra I might have to pay an extra £100, but I can buy it from somewhere in the UK that although in fairness, Panama's and the Infinity that I've used often, I've always been absolutely brilliant if there's anything gone wrong with it.
I've never used the Infinity. Panama's certainly have had some great, we ordered a 51.2 and it just didn't arrive. So they just sent another one, which is incredible, really, all the way from Hong Kong. But I reckon sort of Sony UK can probably afford to do without my one purchase, 2 purchases a year. Whereas, as I say, with the Fuji guys, it was like a bit more personal, really. So,
sure.
Go back to your guitars. What music do you play? What kind of music are you into?
Kind of indie sort of stuff, really. I used to, years ago, I was in a band that was my kind of creative outlet before I did photography. So I used to sort of singer-songwriter stuff when I was just doing solo things, but I wanted to start doing a bit more up-tempo stuff. Like I said, I'm a bit obsessed with Pearl Jam. So I'm trying to write songs that are not obvious Pearl Jam rip-offs. Not succeeding at the moment. So that's my sort of side project for when I've got time. But as you know, when you've got anything like that, before you know it, the day's finished, you're absolutely shattered, and then
completely.
You've got nothing left to do anything like that. But
is there anywhere we can listen to your music, or is that secret at this stage?
I think it's secret at this stage. There is stuff. There's a Reverb Nation. If you've gone to Reverb Nation, you can just search Nick Church. There's my older stuff, but yeah, I'm sure I'll be posting once I've got it to a point where I'm happy for people to listen to it. Don't worry.
I'm dead jealous because I've got a bass guitar upstairs which is going mouldy. I had it for like 4 years. I keep looking at it and thinking I must have another go at that, and I keep picking it up and thinking this is really hard.
Hey, we could start a band. Let's start a band.
Oh well, yeah, with me with one bass note in tune every sort of 5 seconds. Yeah. I can sing though. I can sing. So Sam and I are in Banbury Operatic Society. Although she's not particularly active at the moment, and I'm involved because I'm male and I'm alive, and they're always short of men. So we're in the middle of doing a show, actually.
Two handy attributes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can sing. I can just about act, but don't ask me to dance. You know, I'm like Bambi and Ice if I try and dance. So it's not my thing.
Yeah, I can't dance. I've always thought I'd like to try acting, but I imagine I'd be terrible. I've kind of got this feeling that I think I could do that, but then I know that I couldn't. But Dawn does supporting artist work, so she's an actor in her spare time. Wow. And even just sort of walking out of a shop, it's actually really hard to do and look really natural, you know, whereas I'd be really overacting and I'd be just kicked off the set instantly, I'm sure.
Do you not feel though, like when you, even like we photograph a wedding, and I'm not saying you're acting because you're doing your job, but you adopt a persona?
You do. I think you do, depending on the crowd that you're with. And if there's, I think once you start riffing a little bit with the bride and groom, or if you think that the situation demands it. And that's why wedding photography or any kind of events where you're going to be stuck in there and it's not just taking the photo, it's kind of not, it's using those softer skills a bit, isn't it? And sort of trying to work out what the vibe is and trying to fit in with that. And if it's a really upbeat, lots of jokes going on, then you do find yourself putting on a bit of a persona. And that can be pretty exhausting for me because I'm, like I said, I'm pretty introvert. So by the end of the day, after sort of riffing and almost kind of like being a joker for sort of 10 hours, I'm finished. So afterwards it's like glass of wine, bit of Netflix. No one talked to me for about 12 hours. Thank you very much.
Glass of wine I can relate to, certainly. I quite like it. I mean, like the wedding we did on Sunday, it wasn't they got married on Thursday. We photographed that, and then the Sunday was just a big party. And I normally said another word beginning with P, but a big party. And there were, lots of booze going and stuff. And they're all from my neck of the woods, all from the Midlands, from Birmingham and stuff. And, when you get, oi, cameraman, take my picture. And that really hacks me off, cameraman. But still,
Mr. Photographer, I seem to get.
Oh, you're lucky. I get cameraman.
Yeah, like cameraman. A bit more formal. Mr. Photographer, yeah.
Yeah, I like that, yeah. I'd be happy with that one. But, I'll take your photo, mate. Yeah, delete, But it's part of the job. Having said that, my wife loves just helping out in any way. And let's just say the bride on the weekend got rather tipsy, shall we say, and Sam's there taking her to the loo and helping her out and doing it. And I think, well, why are you doing that? We ain't paid to do that, but that's what she likes to do.
Holding her hair. Yeah, I think it's quite a nice balance. That's why I like this balance. Like when I'm doing an Airbnb or a luxury stay somewhere, you don't get much grief from a load of cushions.
It's true.
So it's kind of a nice chill kind of environment.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So the other things we're going to talk about then, looking forward onto the podcast. So you've mentioned AI. I think we'll do a whole show around AI. And I know you use some AI in your editing, so do I. So I think that's a topic in its own right as well.
Do you know what I saw the other day? Sorry to interrupt you.
Go on, yeah.
I saw that you get binoculars that have got AI in now. I had no idea.
No way.
Yeah, so if you've got these binoculars, I think they're about 3,000 quid, but they'll do low light mode and then basically make it so it looks like daylight. So it's got that. But it will, if you're zooming into a bit of wildlife or a tree, it just comes up and tells you what it is. It tells you what that bird is and what the tree is. And this is really cool. If you so let's say you and I are out bird watching.
Yeah.
Let's hope that never happens. But if it did, I'd say, oh, that's amazing. I've been looking through my binoculars. It would tell me it's a lesser spotted woodpecker. I can pinpoint it, hand you binoculars, and it will guide you to where it is.
Who makes those?
I've just saw there's about three. Oh my gosh, who was it? There was a brand that I recognised and about three others I didn't. But yeah, it's just a thing. In the highest end sort of binoculars, all of this tech going into it.
I suppose you can do that with your phone, mind you. If you take a picture of a tree with the iPhone and you click on eye, it tells you what type of tree it is.
Yeah, but like in real time, that's pretty smart, isn't it?
Well, true, yeah.
You know, so you scanning across different birds is telling you what each one is. Anyway, I'm not a bird watcher particularly.
I thought you were going to say you could use your binoculars in West Bromwich and it looks like the Maldives. You know, apologies if you live in West Brom, guys, but yeah, it's got to give you, augmented reality.
I don't think the tech's there yet for that. That's generation 2 AI. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So that's certainly something to watch out for, you know, and as I say, we look at that in terms of future episodes. And
but presumably it must be like a, if you've got really like low light, then having AI recreate that scene, it leads us into that same thing with photography is about what is that now a real scene or is it computer generated? And if it's, let's say if you were seeing something, so let's say you saw a crime happen, can you say that actually happened, or is that enough of it being recreated by AI that it's not something that could be, you know, you couldn't hang your hat off? Certainly something I know with future guests we've got that are looking at photojournalism and that kind of thing. It's an extremely important angle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, if you're submitting a photograph as evidence, I suppose, has that been manipulated? You know, was that person really there? You know, was that blood stain really there? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So we'll do a whole topic, I'm sure, a whole show around AI as well. I think we said we'd do one around sensors. Not sure what we meant by that, but sensor sizes, sensor types, pros and cons of shooting full frame versus APS-C versus micro four thirds and so on. So I think I need to think a bit more about that one, but I think that was one of the things we said we would talk about.
Do you know the rumor of DJI releasing a mirrorless?
Yeah, I saw that.
Mirrorless camera. So it's completely unverified at the moment. That, by the way, but they have said in response to these rumors, they've said that they don't comment on any rumors before a launch. So please watch official channels. But it'd be quite interesting to see if that is the case about what they do in terms of sensor size, because they've got certainly some of their drones they're much more into the micro four thirds sensor size kind of lens fittings. So would it be that? Would it, you know, in which case then because these rumors in the news articles are always about should Sony and Nikon and Canon be worried about that. But I'm not sure if they would come up with a full frame thing. So I don't think Sony would have anything to worry about, or certainly not for a main camera. If it was a micro four thirds, maybe those smaller, like the smaller Sony, the 60X 100, you know, that range of smaller bodies, maybe that's something that it would be a direct competitor for that. But it's certainly interesting to see.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen about this, dear listener, there was a rumor that was put around that DJI, you know, make the drones, make the Osmo Pockets and all those things, were thinking of launching their own range of interchangeable lens cameras. And then what would they look like? And you know, as you say, what sensor would they use? And I think it's not so much, I mean, there's the whole marketing aspect of that really, but there's also the commercial realities of where you buy sensors from. Because I mean, Sony have got, I think I'm right in saying, something like 75% of the sensor market. Yeah, so would Sony want to supply? I suppose they would. You know, their sensor business would probably want to supply them with full frame. But then, you know, it's such a crowded market already. How do you make a difference?
Yeah,
cheaper? I don't know. Yeah,
that's interesting. That isn't it? I wonder whether certainly because I used to work in the electronics industry, in the TV industry.
I didn't know
sort that. This sort of TV manufacturing industry, and I always felt it was really immoral when companies would say, "Yeah, we don't want you using our hardware." So other companies can buy it, but we don't want that particular company to buy it because they may create something that is a direct competitor. It all seems a little bit unfair. It's not a very level playing field, is it?
No, and it's you know my old business of scientific instruments. There's a load of that going on. So I used to work for a company called Thermo Fisher Scientific, who are like the world's biggest manufacturers of lab equipment, everything from a test tube through to $1 million mass spectrometer. And there was a company, so there's a company called VWR, who were their biggest competitor and their biggest customer. So if you think that through, you know, that's the way some things work, isn't it? And I think the photography industry is the same, really, isn't it? So yeah, I think we'll do more on sensor sizes. I think we said we'd do something on video, though we're not videographers, but I think we said we'd do, you know, a bit about photographers who want to start shooting video. I think was what we thought around.
Yeah, because I think certainly in weddings, it's such an easy upsell in a way. It's something that your clients are asking straight away. And if you're doing commercial stuff, it's the same thing. They are, a lot of companies are asking, can you do video as well? And it's always a tough one. If you, it's fine to say I can't, but I can put you in touch with someone that can, and you can sort of refer people. But if they want the same provider to do both, then that's when it can be tempting just to start trying to sort of brush off your videography skills and get stuck in. But it's a totally different set of skills, isn't it?
It is. And we do a reasonable, probably 1 in 6 weddings, we do some video now as well, but we're very careful to position it as what it is and what it isn't. It's not cinematic video. It's not going to be anything, Hollywood production is going to be matter of fact, the speech is the cake cut, the first dance. But you are right. You're sort of thinking, I'm in video mode now. Okay, so I've got to sort the audio out and what frame rate do I need to be on, and then back into photo mode. It is quite hard.
Have you ever done both at the same time, sort of switching between?
No, I tried. I just found it really hard. I was tripping over myself.
I've done it recently. I almost gave myself a stroke doing it. It's so stressful. Even when you're doing photography, whatever, as listener will know, whatever situation you're in, whether you're doing landscape or whatever, when you can just chill out for a bit because nothing's happening. But when you're when you're doing both, you're thinking I should be getting some B-roll. I better go and get some bloody flowers moving or something. So you are trying to do both. And to take your brain from photo mode into video mode, and your kit's not set up in the same way. You don't have the same equipment. It's not, you're not really geared up for it. It's just a super stressful thing to do.
What I've started using, going back to DJI a minute ago, we've got a Pocket 3, the DJI Pocket 3, which is a 1-inch sensor, stick-based video camera. And to be honest, it's good enough. A lot of, as you say, B-roll and, sort of drinks reception type video.
Totally agree. Yeah, I've worked with a friend of mine, Jan, who does a lot of my video, and one of those, and Nicola as well, has got the same. One of those at the back of your ceremony. It's a fantastic kind of locked off angle, and it's almost, once you've graded it, pretty much indistinguishable from a much bigger camera.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly for the kind of devices people are probably realistically going to watch the video on as well.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah.
So we got lots of thoughts, guys, dear listener, about what we would like to do for future episodes, but more importantly, we'd like to hear from you. What you would like us to feature, what we'd like us to talk about, any kind of guests, any suggestions for guests, we'd love to hear. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, then we'd welcome you to join. It is a private group, so you do have to apply to join. It's called, not surprisingly, the Photography Pod, but that's a great place to ask us questions, to ask questions of anybody else in the group. Nick, I know you're working on a website for the podcast as well.
Yeah, so we'll have that hopefully in very near future, in time for this. So this episode will be the first one. Great. Just so it will be on my website, but it'll be a complete separate page, just so people can read a bit more about the guests we've got on, click through to the audio and that kind of thing. So that will sort of keep everything nicely in one place.
Fantastic. Let's talk about then our next show, which will be in 2 weeks' time, and we do have a guest arranged for that episode. But you've organised it, so you know far more about him than I do. So perhaps you could just say a little bit about who our guest is going to be, Nick.
Yeah, it's a guy called Guy Peterson. So Guy's a photojournalist, worked all over, mostly in African countries, and some fascinating work. And I've spoken to him before at an event and got some really interesting viewpoints on AI, plus some fantastic, just such immersive stories about his travels and what he's done. So that's going to be a really interesting thing. I won't say too much now because we want to him think through his bio as well.
Yeah, so really looking forward to meeting him, albeit virtually, and finding out more about his journey.
Yeah.
Nick, it's been great doing our first podcast together. I'm sure we'll get slicker as the time go forward and get used to working together.
World class. I don't know what you're talking about. Joe Rogan's going to be in trouble. He'll be looking at this now and thinking, "Wow, these guys are on the course to stardom."
He'll be sweating in his sleep right now. Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you for joining us and listening to us, dear listener. Don't forget, if you do want to hear the show regularly, then you can subscribe to it on your favourite podcast app, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or whatever it is you do. If you do use either of those main apps as well, you can leave us a review, which we'd love you to do, because it does help us in lots of mysterious ways. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time, but as I say, don't forget to get in contact with us, join the Facebook group, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.